Hello.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome to the Infinite Awesome Cape and Cowl Comics Book Club show. We are your host, Eitan Manhoff, the owner of Cape and Cowl Comics, and we are here with our friend today to tell you all about Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen.
Yes, that is indeed Eitan Manhoff.
Yeah. Eitan, you've changed.
Go.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Oh, well, that went swimmingly.
So funny.
Hello, everybody. I am the real Eitan Manhoff, owner of Cape and Cowl Comics, and I am here joined by Cody Keene, a.k.a. the Mutant Menace, up there in the upper left, and down at the bottom, our base, our anchor of today is Kevbodzilla McCormick. How's it going, guys?
Doing well. Another excellent day at the shop.
Yeah, a rainy one, huh?
Indeed.
Oh, yeah.
A wet one. But we still had some people come down. Still saw some friendly faces.
Oh, yeah. It was a great day.
Yeah.
Productive.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Well, we are here today, gentlemen, not to talk about the day at the store or the weather or the friendly faces we saw, but we are here to talk about the great Superman's Pal, Jimmy Olsen, by Matt Fraction and Steve Lieber from DC Comics. I've been waiting to talk to you. We've been reading this for a couple of weeks now, getting ready for this, and I've been pumped to talk to you all about it. So we've read, I think we've all read a bunch of stuff by Matt Fraction and Steve Lieber, right? Matt Fraction's probably best known for Sex Criminals, probably Hawkeye, right now currently Adventure Man, but then has done like a ton of Marvel stuff. Been a busy guy for the last probably 20 years or so writing comics. So when you guys hear Matt Fraction, what do you think?
Didn't he do Iron Man Extremis?
Not
Warren Ellis.
That was Warren Ellis, but he
Warren
did do
Ellis.
a long run on Iron Man. I'm not sure what the defining feature of his Iron Man was, really.
Yeah, I feel like he might have followed Extremis. Like it was him after it, maybe.
That could be.
Was his source material, was his stuff the source material for any of the movies? I don't know why in my head when you said that, I instantly thought Matt Fraction's stuff is what one of the Iron Man movies was based on. I think I'm wrong.
It could be. I haven't read outside of Hawkeye and probably Immortal Iron Fist. I was kind of looking doing the bullet points in my head, like what has Matt Fraction written? And I'm like, well, I know he's done way more. So I looked him up and I saw, he's written X-Men, he's written Spider-Man, he's written basically all over the Marvel universe. This is kind of his first foray into DC, maybe his very first jump into DC. But I also think and Hawkeye.
I was going to say, I think the weirdest thing he ever wrote that I've read was Casanova. If you guys ever read that one?
Oh, I tried. It was a little
hard
for me.
Yeah, to answer your question, I hear Matt Fraction in my mind probably goes to Hawkeye just because I think he really nailed that character and it was kind of the perfect take. And my mind goes to Sex Criminals as well, just because it's one of his breakouts. And he did write an Uncanny X-Men run. I'm not big on it, so that's not one of the first things I think of, but he did indeed write some X-Men.
That is a thing that happened.
It is a thing that happened.
Yeah, I think his Hawkeye is really the one that all the rest get kind of compared to. Everything I've read since, it turned me into a Hawkeye fan, so now whenever there's a Hawkeye book, I read it and I'm like, well, that's almost as good as Matt Fraction. Yeah. And then the artist on this book is Steve Lieber, who doesn't have quite as long a list of work, but is fantastic. And I think his big breakout was Whiteout with Greg Rucka, the crime drama comic. And then he did, I first saw him in Superior Foes of Spider-Man and with Nick Spencer about the inferior, or what are those? What's that group of villains called? The Sinister Six.
Sinister Six, something like that.
In that series, it's a team of 5. The Sinister Six. Amazing, and you really
Yeah.
see his talent for comedy in that book, like physical comedy that he brings into the page is amazing. And then
Absolutely. And that work is very like simpatico with a lot of Fraction stuff, ironically, because Nick Spencer writes that with the same kind of snappy wit that you get with your Matt Fractions and your Matt Rosenbergs.
yeah, absolutely. And then he worked with Nick Spencer again on The Fix, where they really got to like take all the rules away, just hit the gas and be raunchy and all kinds of gross and silly. And that's a fun book. The store actually has a little bit of a history with Steve Lieber. I met him at a Comics Pro conference in 2016. It was my very first one. It was in Portland. And when they do it in Portland, they bring a lot of creators from the area in to meet the comic book retailers. And I ended up sitting at a table with him, and he did a doodle of the dog from The Fix on a napkin for me. And like I completely lost it. Shitty. Probably used it as a bookmark and lost it.
He sent us a cool doodle on a postcard too that had Jimmy on it. It was adorable. So Steve Lieber, friend of the shop, friend of the pod.
That's right. Yeah, he joined us for a book club at the store once via Skype at the time. Probably could have reached out to him for this, but I didn't.
Well, hopefully he'll catch wind of it. Hopefully he and Matt will catch wind of it and be able to see us tear apart this shitty book. I'm just kidding. It's fabulous.
Yeah, I was gonna say like Steve Lieber, I best know him from The Fix, but this I think this Jimmy Olsen might be some of the best Steve Lieber I've seen, just because he gets the chance to be so weird and draw so many things that are just bizarre.
Oh my God. And it's so much fun. And half of the comedic effect of this book is owed to Steve Lieber. Like, I don't know, it would be so interesting to see the joke and gag duties and how they were split, because a lot of this book is visual humor. There's things that you just see in the panels. Like the writing is hilarious too, but a lot of it is stuff you'll see in the background that just had me dying. So Steve Lieber definitely knows that visual comedy and how to be subtle.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, when we decided to read this book, when I made this decision to read this book with no input from anybody else, nobody said anything about reading this book, and I just picked it out of the blue as something to read. Certainly Cody didn't have anything to do with it.
No.
But coming into it now, Kevin, I know you read it in singles as it came out, so you got to get in your Wayback Machine. But thinking before first time, what were you expecting? When you saw Fraction, what did you think you were in for?
After the first issue, I thought I was just getting like a variety show type comic, and I was on board. I liked the narration. It definitely harkened back to the silliness of like the old, Silver Age stuff, and it felt like a Jimmy Olsen comic, to be honest. But as soon as you start reading it, you get the sense that the comedy is kind of on another level. I didn't really get a sense initially of any sort of like narrative thread that was going through the issues so much. It's really seemed kind of like an afterthought. But after rereading it this time, it really tightens up towards the last few issues and really gets better than I remembered. I liked it a lot. The singles, though, were really fun to read because it gives you a chance to catch your breath between all of the narration that Matt Fraction does, which is cool, but it can be a little heavy-handed when you're running up against it every 10 minutes or something. But the nice thing about this book is that you can I read really fast, and this is one of those books I took my time on, just because, like Cody was saying, the visual gags are such a major component that you don't want to miss anything, and the facial expressions and all that stuff, you just really nailed it.
Well, it's interesting that you say too that there was like you when you first picked it up and you read just a couple issues, you weren't seeing the narrative thread that runs through it. And that struck me because it's interesting, because with this book, it might tend to feel disjointed to some people, but I think that's such a storytelling choice, because this is a book that jumps around, right? Like in almost in the time of what we're dealing with, like something will happen and the next issue is clearly like before. And like even the narration will be like, now, how the heck did that happen? Or like, remember this guy, the last time we saw him. And so it really plays with time as far as the storytelling goes.
Yeah,
Right.
I was definitely struck by, like, when you're reading it in singles, you don't really have a sense of how the little asides with, like, I think we were talking about this before, like the Snoopy art little asides that are like 3 pages. Like, they're spaced perfectly and they're put in exactly the right place. But when you're reading it in singles, it's kind of harder to get a sense of that. And I think, did this go all the way through 1 through 12, or was there a pause in the middle? Eitan, do you remember?
I think what happened, I was trying to remember why I hadn't read the end of this until now. And I think it ended post like the beginning, or as the pandemic started. It ended in like March or April. I think the pause in distribution in March and April delayed issues 11 and 12 of the series.
Yeah.
So there was a pause that was not intended and probably not needed for any kind of storytelling purpose, but just because they weren't shipping books at the time.
God, it's such a bummer too. That shutdown really killed a lot of storytelling plans, man. It really, it's such a bummer. People came back to things very like disoriented, myself included. And it was just, but you know, we're back. So,
and this book is one of those kinds of books. I think that a change like that hits it a little harder than a straight narrative. You know, like when you got to get used to the way the narration's done, the way the story's being told, and remember what the hell's happened to characters. And you know, even though there's 11 preceding issues, you're dealing with 20 to 30 different stories because each issue has like a solid handful of stories in it.
Yeah, well, especially because this book is non-linear and it's storytelling, so any kind of break will longer than intended really kind of kills some of the vibe.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, coming into it before starting it, I didn't expect it to be such an ode to Silver Age comics, and I don't know why. I guess if you're doing a Jimmy Olsen comic, like you're going old school, because that was a Golden Age, Silver Age book. I was expecting kind of more Fraction to take, Jimmy Olsen and do a quirky story about a lovable loser trying to get by in Metropolis, and I don't think I saw this coming. That's just this like very silly, gag a minute, almost comic strip style, stacking on top of each other. But I really enjoy it. I do think it's something that probably read better in single issues than I think you can read it in a trade just fine, but reading it, the way that we read it, like cramming, trying to get them in between a bunch of other stuff in time for something was a challenge. But
this is for most of our book clubs, I try to read on my weekend, which is like a couple days before we shoot these. And certain parts of this book got a bit grating when you're trying to read it under time. Like I wish I had just read one issue a night or 2 issues a night up to the time, because then this comic is just packed full of so many gifts and like things to look forward to about this book that when you read it all at once, it can be very, very like, I don't want to say dense or heavy or anything like that. It's just some of the gags would be so nice in an episodic fashion. Like read this in bits, I think. Yeah. And you have those kind of
pretty convoluted. Yeah.
I think it's mixed in with other things. Yeah. I mean, just if you read your serious Batman and then you're like Hickman X-Men mixed in and Jimmy Olsen, you're like, it's gonna be like a fresh of breath air.
Yeah.
You can say
breath air.
Yeah.
I feel like it's worth mentioning too that this book was essentially the foil for Lois Lane that started at the exact same time. Also a 12-issue maxi series which dealt with her as like an investigative journalist hitting the streets trying to get the real scoop, all framed by the event Leviathan, I believe. So this was kind of like the only book that I was reading from DC at the time that was silly and fun and made me laugh out loud. And I think it was also sort of magnified by the fact that everything else that was coming out was very specifically about the big event that was going on with DC.
Yeah.
But I feel like the convoluted nature of it, I felt that until I got to like the last 2 or 3 issues, and then I wanted to go back and reread some of the previous issues to make sense of some of the revelations that you get. So I know we had talked about this a couple days ago, and my opinions were kind of half-baked because I finished it last night, and I was like, oh, yeah, this story ends really good. Like, I forgot how it tied into Event Leviathan, like Jimmy Olsen buying the planet. I just thought that Jimmy being Jimmy did something that made him rich, and he bought the planet. But then I remembered after reading this, there was like a whole fucking 12-issue thing that built up to that.
Right.
So
Let's talk a little bit about those 12 issues. I don't want to. It's not gonna. I don't want to rehash the entire plot because I don't know that we can. It's there's so much to it and so many threads and all these things, but I think we can talk about that. Each issue had some like major, revelations or events or gags that are worth mentioning. And why don't we go through those? And then I've got some questions for you guys. I'm just curious about how you felt about specific things. I came up with some quiz questions, so I hope you are paying attention. I hope you have your note cards handy and you studied last night before we came to school today.
No, I didn't study, but I'm really good at winging tests, so let's do it.
True.
Cool. Well, it's interesting that the trade, the book itself begins with the little prelude that came in the Event Leviathan special. It's not in the Jimmy Olsen #1, but it was there was what was that issue called? Event Leviathan. Maybe just Event Leviathan or
Leviathan Rising or some shit.
Yeah, maybe something like that. There's where Bendis was putting together, kind of as Bendis does, like laying out the threads that he was going to follow in the Superman universe, or that he and his friends were going to follow, him and Fraction and Rucka, where they were going with Superman over the course of the year. And in there is the short story where you get some pretty important information for this book. One, Jimmy Olsen is married, to an alien, and that he has Dexstar, the Red Lantern cat, and that he hangs out in Gorilla City all the time, which sounds awesome because Gorilla City booze apparently is the business. What was it? Gorilla City wine or champagne? Or
it was champagne.
Champagne. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you get that piece of information. I mean, you end up getting that info later in the book, but it's many issues later. So it's kind of interesting that they put it at the beginning of this trade. I think it's helpful.
I think it didn't quite fit with the rest of the story. Like you couldn't really inject it between the issues of something someone's reading in a book format. When it was coming out in the single issues and you're bouncing between Event Leviathan and Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen, like that issue being kind of in the middle or at least after a few of the first issues, it was fine. But I think in the book it needed to be like shoved to the front or the back, and in this case the front was definitely a better choice because
I think it came out before the Jimmy Olsen series started.
Did it?
Yeah. It was like the first thing before Jimmy and before Lois, and then before that kind of arc that kicked off in Superman.
Was there a big gap between them?
I don't know. I don't recall. But I know for sure this was our first taste of Jimmy Olsen. That book had our first taste of Lois Lane, kind of as a little tease.
Honestly, it was so great. I mean, I don't have any context whatsoever for Event Leviathan, but this prologue encapsulates like exactly what you can come to expect, and I thought it set it up brilliantly. Like I loved that it was included in the trade.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Totally.
I mean, it just hits you like what you were going to get.
Right. It sets the tone. You know exactly like the humor you're in for, and absolutely. So then in issue #1, the big thing that we learned at the beginning of this story is that the Olsens and the Luthers have a feud that goes back generations, countless generations. They are the
centuries.
Families, centuries. They are the pillars that Metropolis stands on. These two families, and it's all about fighting over the land that becomes Metropolis. Which I love that addition to the kind of the Superman lore of the Luthers having this foil, and it being the Olsens.
And I loved that entire like component of this story, like the fact that the Olsens and the Luthers came to town around the same time when the land was being settled, and then what was it like? Luthor ended up kicking one of the Olsen patriarchs off of a cliff, and he
I
ends
was
up
actually,
falling
I
into
was,
the
I was
river
just
and
about to
finding the
highlight this
gold.
because this
That's
was
so
so
fucking
funny to me
cool.
because he like hands him the the petitions to sign it to like hand over the land, and like
Yeah.
Olsen kind of makes this power play of like ripping it up and right in front of them, and I actually laughed out loud when he just like smacks him with his shovel, knocks him off. Like there's no words exchanged, and he thinks he's like a badass. He rips it up and he's like, "Feh." And then they just knock him off the cliff. It's so funny. But yeah, like Kevin was saying, he pretty much lands on top of like solid gold nuggets, and it just becomes rich that way through his rebellion and subsequent like dumbassery of getting knocked off the cliff. He becomes a millionaire, which sets up the Olsens for life.
Well,
Right.
and actually, too, the Olsens like chase off the Luthers after that, and then the Luthers came back later under a different surname.
Yeah, it was like they had a different like name at first, right? But it was kind of like a
The Luthers were the Alexanders, I think, at the beginning.
right, yeah. And it was like, yeah, Latius or something.
Yeah. The names in this book, the constant like shifting of weird versions of Jimmy and all of the other Olsens and Luthers was so funny.
Yeah, we got like
Jennifer.
Jonas Olsen and
Okay, here's
Well
my
done, McGillicuddy.
here's my
Joaquim
first question for you.
Olsen.
Are you ready for your first quiz question?
Yes.
Before it was named Metropolis, what was this land called that the Olsens and the Luthers are fighting over?
Am I allowed to cheat? I have the book with me.
No, look.
What?
Don't look. You can look.
Oh. That sucks because it's so. I feel like it's on the tip of my tongue though.
I don't know.
I'll tell
But
you.
you'll have to tell me when. Oberstad Falls. Oberstad or New Oberstad.
Oberstad. And I was reading that and I was like, what is that name? Like, that's got to be something. It's too random.
Yeah, is it?
It's a random
For
assortment.
sure.
So Ancestry.com says that Oberstad is a surname often associated with certain physical characteristics, such as, what do you think?
Square jaw.
Red hair.
Oh,
Like an Olsen or a Luther. So
That's
Oberstad,
fabulous.
last name for redheaded families.
That's great.
Yeah, I thought that was really funny. I think the other really significant thing about this issue, other than getting the feud between the Olsens and Luthers, is that you really see this bromance between Superman and Jimmy Olsen. Like, there's probably a solid 6 pages of them hanging out on the roof of the Daily Planet, just being goofy. Superman's like doing an old card trick he must have learned, on the farm as a kid. He's saying one of his superpowers is like eating hot dogs really fast. Like, they're just having fun being dumb on the roof. And I don't know if I've ever seen the friendship shown in like this. Like, you see, Superman's let his guard down. He's really just hanging out with his buddy. It's not like, I saved you, Jimmy, because we're pals, and I always am listening for you. It's like they're actually friends.
It definitely solidified the fact that he is indeed Superman's pal, and it solidifies it right away.
Yeah, I loved it. It made me so happy to see. One of the things that happens when they're hanging out on the roof is that Superman does have to fly away real fast to save a kitten from a tree.
He says, hold on. Sorry, I had a thing.
Yeah. He comes back, and that leads me to quiz question number 2. Are you ready? Okay. What did Superman name the cat that he saved from the tree and brought back to Jimmy on the roof?
Hell if I remember.
I don't know, man. I think what is it?
Paquaman.
Oh, right. I remember that.
I thought that was funny.
I thought it was good too. I think that for quiz questions, you should mention the answers in your description of the issue before you give us the questions.
How do you mean?
Like, I didn't read for comprehension. I don't remember Paquaman off the top of my head.
Well, this is like any great trivia. This is like the minutia of the details.
It's okay. So. Keep them coming. I got this.
All right. Well, those were my takeaways from issue 1. Mostly, I wanted to know how you guys felt about that the the bromance between Superman and Jimmy Olsen? Like, did that do it for you? Was that, significant to you at all?
I absolutely loved it because I'm somebody that doesn't really care for Superman, but this is the Superman I like. I like the wholesome kind of, the lovable oaf guy. I loved him in All-Star Superman, where he's just being wholesome. And like my favorite, I don't read a lot of Superman, but it was instantly my favorite scene is when he helps the young woman who's about to jump off of the skyscraper in All-Star Superman and just tells her that she's strong, and she backs out of it. Like that was like, that lives rent free in my mind. That's a superhero moment that definitely does. So any like wholesome Superman content where he's just like silly and lovable and not necessarily being like a gladiator, a strong guy and kicking ass, like I really appreciate, because I think he is more of a symbol. And when he stands for that and is a good friend and a solid dude, it's really heartwarming.
Yeah. I think that's the Superman we get throughout this.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, we can get into it. But when he's like, no, Jimmy made me promise not to help. La 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 la. Like trying not to get the details on like where Jimmy is or what he's doing. Like so funny.
I like this part probably almost even more for what it says about Jimmy. The fact that he's like sitting on top of the globe at the Daily Planet, just chatting with Superman, just like being a buddy. You never get the sense that Jimmy fully understands the gravity or the weight of the situation that he's in, or the things that are just kind of a boon for him that I don't want to say takes for granted, but I mean, most people will be like, that's Superman. I want to impress Superman. I want to, like do something that Superman's going to think's cool. And Jimmy just doesn't give a shit. He's just like chatting and talking and being Jimmy. And Superman's like, yeah, Jimmy, you're right. Like we totally do this or that. Like,
okay. And
it's just so good. I just think that it says so much about Jimmy. I mean, even when he's like turning into a fucking turtle in space and flying all the way into Metropolis and destroying a statue, he still doesn't really seem to get the gravity of the fact that he just got kicked out of a space station and he's plummeting through the atmosphere. Like there's so many parts in the book with him like that I think just are worth their weight in gold.
Well, and I love that you brought that up too, because that struck me too, because when you think about it, I feel like he's written the most accurately as possible because of that, because I'm not sure if it's that he doesn't grasp the gravity, but that he's never had to grasp the gravity. When you're best friends with Superman, that's never been a thing in your life. And when you've had the adventures that Jimmy's had and come out unscathed, you're gonna have a devil may care attitude because you don't know consequence. And all like the flashbacks of him that are like, the Snoopy Charlie Brown style, it shows that he's actually always been this way. He's kind of carefree. There's all this stuff about how he, ever since he was little and growing up with his capitalist brother and his like goth revolutionary sister, and he just doesn't share these concerns. He's just kind of like, life is awesome and I want to see all the things and do all the things. I don't want to make money. I just want to do the things. Like, and having a best friend like Superman is going to reduce you to I don't want to say reduce, that sounds harsh, but it's going to bring you to this level where you don't really have much concern. And it's like, yeah, things are crazy. Yeah. Like Kevin, you said earlier, like Gorilla City, I go there all the time. It's just like, what do you mean? Calm down. It's fine. Like, this is life.
There was a quote in that little prelude that comes before issue 1, and I wrote it down. I meant to say it because after this craziness in Gorilla City, and the cat comes and starts spraying blood everywhere, and it's just madness, and he finds out he's married, and he turns to the cat and he says, "The craziest thing, Mr. Kitty, this is the sort of nonsense I'll literally never think about ever again."
Yeah, right, exactly. That sums it up. Like, I won't ever think about that.
Perfect Jimmy Olsen. And if you ever read like the Silver Age Jimmy Olsen stuff, he turns into a giant turtle. He turns into a 10-story tall giant, and then the next issue he's just Jimmy at the paper, and then like Clark comes and he's like, "That rock will turn a person into a living dinosaur," and he's like, "Wow, are you serious?" The person, last week you were made out of gum and like spinning around trees and being stretched. Like, what do you mean? Wow, of course. So that was just, it was so perfect.
I adore this character. Just being a love letter to Silver Age comics, which I always love to read, and just bow ties. I wore a bow tie today because we were talking about this, and it's like a recurring little symbol marking like the end of little sessions and chapters, and I just adored it. I had more to say, now I just forgot, so we'll just move on.
Sure. Well, so next issue, another big major event entitled Superman Pal Jimmy Olsen, Who Killed Jimmy Olsen? Jimmy Olsen gets moited. He gets
Flat out
straight
moited.
moited. And we see that he moves to Gotham City. He gets killed.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. What got me interested in ever reading this book, because like usually Superman books and adjacent books are off my radar, but I heard in a podcast that in this book, Jimmy Olsen moves to Gotham and has a terrible time. That was literally all I needed. I really wanted to read him moving to Gotham and having a terrible time. So anyway, now that we're there, let's talk more about it.
Dude, and terrible time is super subjective. It seemed to me like he was having a pretty awesome time in Gotham.
Because it's Jimmy, right? Like this is just like Jimmy is like, here I am right now, whatever.
He's gonna make the most of it. This issue is also where we actually find out that Jimmy's family is super rich, which, as far as I know, was added here. You know, Jimmy has not been super rich in the past.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he's just been a kid. You know, usually, actually, there's been other Jimmy Olsen series where he is like other modern Jimmy Olsen, where he's just like struggling to get by. You know, just
like a Peter Parker without the webs.
Yeah, exactly. A Peter Parker without the web. So
well, and they kind of highlight that at one point, right? There's like a page full of all the Jimmys, like, and I'm not talking about the Death of Superman gag, but I'm talking about when they're like, Jimmy's been so many people, right? And I feel like it was a page, I forget which issue it is, but it's almost dedicated to different writers doing Jimmy. And they're like, you've been like the haggard war reporter, you've been this and that. Like, are those all kind of faces of Jimmy we've seen artists and writers take him, or?
Yeah, I mean, definitely like the hipster kind of photographer guy, and then also like the flash. You get flashes of Jimmy as like a very serious photographer. He's not serious, but he goes with Lois wherever Lois goes. And Lois obviously goes to very serious stuff, and he's just like, okay,
like an embedded war photographer. Like he does shit like that. I've seen in previous stuff.
Which, by the way, we have to highlight at some point his relationship with Lois, because it's priceless, absolutely priceless. When she's smoking in the apartment in Gotham, and he's like, no, you can't do that. Like, there's rules here. And then at one point she picks up her vape, and she's like, Miss Lane, vaping is for teens. It's so funny.
That was one of the funniest things. It was such a great moment. I also love it. That's another friendship.
I just love that. I love that Lois Lane has a vape. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's just really funny to me. But go on.
She's got to get that nicotine. She's got to hide the smell from Clark. You know, but I enjoyed that friendship being shown too, because also you know, Jimmy calls Lois and is like, "Hey, I've been murdered. We'll get to that later. I need help figuring out who killed me." And Lois is like, "Yeah, all right, I'm coming." You know, there's
also visual gags in that scene of all her like post-its and like her messages on her cubicle that are like pretty outrageous and fun.
Absolutely. Okay, so then we move into. I have some other stupidly hard quiz question. Here's a factoid for you. I'll give it as a factoid, not as a quiz question. All these these like Julian Olsen, Jane Olsen, all these people, none of them existed before this series. They're all brand new. So they're you know, they were, as far as we knew, Jimmy was just Jimmy. You know,
I was gonna ask about that.
Yeah, so all these people are new, which I think is kind of interesting, and it's great. Like, it's great that he's got the capitalist brother and the artist sister and the wealthy ancestors and stuff. It adds dimension to the character that wasn't.
One of my favorite gags is in one of the Snoopy flashbacks where his brother is off on one of his like capitalist tangents, and he's kind of ranting at Jimmy about how economics work and stuff. And in the background, it's not even spoken about, but Jane is in the background building a guillotine. Oh my god, lost my shit. It was so funny. I was showing that to Jacob, like, just building a guillotine in the back. Like, it was so funny. I loved it.
Yeah.
I think without the examples of his brother and sister, Jimmy would truly just be a random character. I think adding that extended family to the mythology and the canon is a huge move by Matt Fraction for making Jimmy a bit more of a justifiable, maybe realistic character. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like in my brain, he's way more realistic knowing that he had like uber rich capitalistic siblings and his family was involved with the building of Metropolis, given what we know about how random his adventures are and the affluent superheroes he hangs out with. Like, this book made him. It made him more of a person to me. I don't have, I think, all the context that you have, Aton, reading a lot of Kirby's, Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen, but I loved it. This was like, I thought Jimmy was just kind of like a cool buddy sidekick in the past, and this book really made him his own character.
Sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've always loved Jimmy Olsen, but it's because he's Jimmy Olsen, just because he's there.
Right.
Like I love Jimmy Olsen because I love Superman, because I love Lois Lane, and I love the Daily Planet and all this stuff. But this really made him a full character, not just like a gag or a sidekick, or the Kirby stuff's actually very different. He's like kind of cool guy, like adventurer in the Kirby stuff. So that's one of those versions that we see on the Psychiatrist Couch.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it's really good. Issue 3, just briefly, we find out there's a mysterious villain coming after Jimmy. That's what we see. Somebody actually tricked a scientist into making him into that giant turtle monster that we were talking about before, that jumps out of the spaceship and crashes down into Metropolis. We also we get the secret behind Jimmy's death. Spoilers, it wasn't actually Jimmy who gets assassinated, but a Jimmy assassination decoy doll.
Hey, let's go ahead and say, if you're worried about spoilers, this is the wrong type of podcast to be watching.
True.
We are covering this from issue 1 to 12, so.
Right. And then, so this, I felt like in issue 3 is when the vignettes really kind of, I don't know, maybe they're happening a ton in issue 1 and 2, but it's issue 3 is when it really kind of sunk in for me. Like, we are going to get this story 2 pages at a time. And it's like somebody took the puzzle pieces and threw them up in the air and are picking them up like in the best order they can. But they're just reaching for the pretty ones too. And I'm just curious how you guys felt about that format.
I feel like the further I got into it, the more I was clearly able to explain to myself what was going on. But I did find that the narration at sometimes was so heavy and so big at the beginning of an issue, I would breeze over it. And it would take me a little while longer to figure out how the issue I was reading connected to the greater story. Whereas if I had read the narration at the beginning of the issue, it would have been like, oh, hey, this is like referring to what happened previously. So there were like points where I got a little lost. I thought I was just reading a bunch of random shit. And maybe that's why when I got towards the end, it just kind of like congealed into this cohesive story that I understood, like how we got from point A to B. But initially, I didn't have the greater continuity in mind. I thought I was also reading just a bunch of really random, super silly Jimmy Olsen stories.
Yeah. I kind of felt like it was a take it a page at a time, enjoy the page, enjoy the joke, enjoy the art, and it's all going to come together at the end, and it does. But sometimes I definitely was confused. I was like, wait, did this happen? But now we're getting how it happened later, and sometimes it tells you that that's what it's doing, like explaining that for you, and sometimes it doesn't. It's just like,
right. I just tried to not pay attention to time, like just ignore the time, read the stories, fit them together in your head, and then, at issue around 10, 11, 12, they will put them together for you. And then you can compare your notes to what the story actually is.
Right.
There were some really cool techniques that are, in my opinion, pretty unique to comics, because it's a lot of simply visually telling you when things happen. I remember there's one issue, forgive me, I don't remember which, but it was really cool because it starts with I think it's Lex Luthor talking to, I think, Jimmy's brother, and they're like at Lex's office or something. And the very first speech bubble is him like finishing a thought on the phone. And then he hangs up the phone, and then you get the scene with Jimmy's brother. And then later on, you actually see who calls Lex Luthor. And then in the panel where Lex Luthor's talking to him on the phone, you instantly recognize it from that scene where he was ending a phone call with somebody, leading you into the scene with Jimmy's brother. So good. Like, I love that shit. Like, visually telling me that this is when that happens was awesome. Like, that really worked. It doesn't work every time in this book, but that was a good example of when you're like, ooh, like, this is who he was talking to. So it recontextualized that scene, because at that point he knows that Jimmy's brother is a skis who's been orchestrating this, and he hangs up with him, and then he just coolly finishes his conversation with Jimmy's brother with full knowledge of what's going on, and it completely recontextualizes that scene. So that was awesome.
You know, and I think that it kind of lends to just the genius of Matt Fraction's storytelling, that he doesn't overuse a gimmick like that. You know, like in the book, he could have done a lot of that sort of stuff, showing similar stories from different angles. I mean, fuck, he had 20 stories to show different angles from. But the fact that he didn't make that scene a lot more impactful, I agree. It was something that was unique even to the book that it was in. And it worked perfectly for what it was trying to deliver. Yeah.
Cool. So in issue 4, we get so Jimmy is now dead, but he needs an alter ego because he's not actually dead. But he wants to find out what's going on. And part of his plan to figure this out is to take on this alter ego of Timmy Olsen, the shithead prank blogger. And we get some glorious pages of his pranks in Gotham City. They're almost all directed at Batman. Like, how many Jokers can we get in this at this ice cream shop?
How many Jokers in the frozen yogurt shop? Yeah, it's so good before Batman notices. And this was so good because it was like Matt Fraction's chance to completely tear apart like YouTube and TikTok and meme culture, because Timmy Olsen is the most obnoxious little shit doing everything for the grams, like for Instagram, like. Oh my God, it was perfect.
This issue and issue 5 are actually my favorite of the entire series. This one with the pranks, and you get to see some of the direct pranks on Batman, like stealing a wheel from the Batmobile.
He whipped out an old Jason Todd trick on that one.
Batmobile lost a wheel.
Yeah. Oh my God,
Jimmy Olsen got away.
The reporter literally is like, and I repeat, that wheel has lost a wheel. Like,
my favorite prank by far is switching the bat signal for a Superman symbol in the sky. And they turn on the bat signal, and it just blasts the Superman. What could make Batman more angry than that?
Well, and at that point too, I think when they show the fact that he swapped the signal, Jimmy's like I think he's talking to someone who's like, you haven't like done anything really bad, right? And he's like, no, I think I'm fine. And then it's like the fucking bat signal or the Superman symbol on the clouds. It was like, yeah.
He's talking to Lois because Lois is in town, and he's got his crazy board. Where he's
the crazy board.
These are probably my 2 favorite pages of the book.
When he's sliding around it, right?
He's walking down the different strings on the crazy board from picture to picture and kind of narrating his theory.
Oh my God, can you also talk about that news article where it's like Matt Fraction breaking the fourth wall a little bit? He's like, I'm a grown-ass adult, and that's a sentence I just wrote. Like, the reporter of that article is just like, one point quits their job in the middle of writing the article. It's so funny.
Premature ejaculation.
Ejaculation, yeah.
I love that so much. He breaks down his theory for Lois on what happened to him, and Lois is also... that's a theory. You have no proof and no facts and no corroboration.
It's just a crazy board.
It's a crazy board. Which we learned in this book. Do you want the quiz question, or do you want me to tell you what Lois tells him the crazy board is called in real life?
Give it.
Do the question.
What is the proper name for Jimmy's crazy board?
Fuck. This is like, okay, with all the crime procedurals and true crime I watch, I should really know this.
It's a sociogram.
Yes, sociogram.
I didn't know. She says that, and I actually looked it up just to make sure it wasn't Matt Fraction making up a word.
And Lois would be the wrong one to get your facts wrong with. You better know what you're talking about if you're writing Lois Goddamn Lane.
That's right. And so that issue then leads into issue number 5, which is what I like to think of as the Batman issue. Or even better, the Bruce Wayne issue.
So good.
So fucking good. Just painfully good. It includes my favorite panel. Maybe ever. It's maybe my favorite panel in comic book history.
Okay, but you have to set the scene. He's on a date with this like social media influencer who's doing it just because he's Bruce Wayne. She's completely detached, uninterested, not listening to him. And she has some great lines that, Kevin, you actually showed me this issue, and you're the one that sold me on reading this book, like to actually do it, because she's talking about how she's like the it girl in New Girl magazine, and I'm the new girl in It Girl magazine, and I actually got called girl by Beyonce to my face. Like she's just disaffected, like socialite, doing selfies at dinner. And so Bruce seizes on this opportunity. He knows she couldn't care less. He knows she's barely listening. So he says, to her, can you see it? Is it too blurry? The text probably won't come through, but this is great to see the scene.
I'm Batman.
Closer. I can see it.
I'm Batman at night. And I love it too. It is 2 sentences. It is 2 distinct sentences. I'm Batman at night.
At night.
She says, really? Says, no. It's another one of my hilarious jokes. And he goes for another drink.
And this is where we also get a glimpse of Batman, the shameless self-promoter, which is never a side of Batman I've ever seen in my life. But throughout the rest of the book, Batman continues to expound upon the fact that he is the best investigator. He has the most awesome jokes. And it's like never the case. It's so good. It's just like,
in fact, Alfred
Bruce is a rich white boy who had someone who told him that everything he did was great.
Yeah, there's like a dead serious confrontation with Alfred back in the Batcave, where he doesn't sit Alfred down, but he all but sits Alfred down, and he's like, Alfred, how long have you been paying people to laugh at my jokes? And he like says he's been doing it for years, with like a huge sum of money has been paid so that people laugh at Bruce's jokes. And by the way, and Alfred says, how did you find out, sir? And he's like, because I'm an amazing detective. Amazing. By the way, he did not find this out through detective work. He happened to be defecating in a bathroom stall and overheard 2 gentlemen talking about how annoying Bruce is. And that's how he found out. Not detective work, just happenstance.
Happened to be taking a dump at the right time in the right place.
But wait, let's say it in the right voice. I'm an awesome detective.
Amazing.
I'm amazing.
And Alfred, leave the edible arrangement. Brucey hungry. Brucey very hungry.
Oh yeah, and even the fact that he tells Alfred, he's like, that is going to come out of your paycheck dollar for dollar. He's like, Alfred has paid people, I think it was over $80,000 over the years to laugh at Bruce's jokes. And so Bruce just like turns around and says, okay, we're basically going to pay that back.
And I love this so much because Matt Fraction writes Batman the way that I have seen him for a long time. I hope Aton doesn't fire me, but he's pretty much a sociopathic jerk because it's so funny how he would dock Alfred's pay for something like this in this book. And also there's like a visual gag by Steve Lieber that's amazing. It's the Batmobile like peeling out and hydroplaning, and he splashes on this old woman being pushed in a wheelchair by this elderly man, and he just like hydroplanes and splashes them, and it's just like the panel is the guy shaking his fist at the Batmobile, and Bruce just doesn't even know they exist. So funny.
Oh. I mean, I would read an entire book of this Batman. That's like sad, self-centered, stupid Batman.
Man.
But this issue,
and I do hope I still have a job. But
you do. I got nobody else. I have to have that. I have to have you, Batman hating.
No, I don't hate him. I just like this take on him very much.
The most significant part of this issue, besides the amazing Batman work, is that we find out that there was a little forbidden love potentially between the Olsens and the Luthers back in the day. The families came together in ways they shouldn't have.
It was a big no-no.
That's a big no-no. And of course, that's going to pay off later. You don't just slip a little something like that into the page without it.
You don't just slip a little Olsen to some Luther and expect it.
Hey now.
Hey yo.
There's actually, and then also Batman gets a little revenge on Jimmy for his pranks, and he ends up legally changing Jimmy's name to Jimphony. He points out that it rhymes with something. And he leaves him a present, and in the present, Jimmy opens a present, and there's a little blue cat who proceeds to spray blood everywhere out of his mouth.
Now, can you clarify, is this a cat from Green Lantern? Is this like the Red Lantern cat?
So that is Dexter. That is Dexter, the Red Lantern cat. Red Lanterns are the lanterns of rage. And if anybody has ever had a cat or known a cat or seen a cat, you know that they are the most rage-filled creatures on the planet. So having a cat being a Red Lantern is perfect.
And wasn't that the Red Lantern MO? They would vomit the blood onto their opponent, and then that would incite rage and madness in the person they were facing. Is that right?
Yep, oftentimes, or just be very painful or burn. You know,
I mean, I remember Atrocitus spitting some red shit onto people's faces a couple times. So
yeah, they spray blood. Do you guys know? Here's my quiz question: do you know what planet Dexter is from?
Oh, I don't.
He's from Earth. He's just an Earth cat.
Okay, so did you guys catch the fact that like very clearly as a blood mess preventative measure, they put a glass dome little like spaceman helmet on Daxter? So
wasn't big on that.
Did you notice that when the cat's hanging there with the globe on its head and the fucking spaceship smashes through the wall, that when you look down at the cat, there's like a fucking like surprise vomit of blood on the inside of the helmet? I laughed so hard, and it's such a stupid, tiny little visual detail. But when I saw like the spaceship come through the wall of Jimmy's apartment, and then the cat's just like, bleh! Like so good. So good.
Great.
I also like the fact that Batman had no idea that Jimmy was the one that stole his wheel.
Yeah. Until
like he gets into the apartment and he's like,
"Oh yeah,
is that like, my wheel?" And I was just like, "Oh my god, Batman had no idea. That's amazing."
And the fact that Jimmy came home and just like set it down is so funny to me too.
What else are you gonna do with it? Leave it outside. Right?
So good.
The issue 6 sees Jimmy get arrested for crimes against the multiverse and then released from prison the very next day, which plays into the mystery of everything that's going on. You also meet Jim Corrigan, who is a detective who's going to help investigate the murder of Jimmy.
I got a question.
Yeah. More important.
Who's the other Jim Corrigan? Who's the one who he keeps saying he isn't? I have no idea who the fuck that guy is, and I was wondering the entire time.
Spectre himself.
Jim Corrigan is the original Spectre. Who is also a detective who was killed in the line of duty and became the Spectre, the Wrath of God. It's really weird. In I think Gotham Central, they introduced this Jim Corrigan character, and they're like, "Oh shit. It must just be the new version of Jim Corrigan. Like this guy must be the Spectre." And he's just not.
That's kind of awesome.
Jim Corrigan, a detective. And then there's another guy in Gotham Central. You guys remember Crispus Allen? He's another detective from Gotham City. He actually physically looks a lot like this Jim Corrigan. Like they're both bald. They both have a goatee. Like they look exactly the same. And Crispus Allen becomes a Spectre later on. I don't know.
I love it.
I guess it was meant to be a red herring. There's actually, it must have been. I mean, there's a whole story arc called like The Spectre of Vengeance or something. And it's about this Jim Corrigan guy. And the whole time you're kind of thinking, oh shit, he's going to get killed and he's going to become the Spectre. And he just instead he just gets vengeance. Like it's a cool play on words. It's kind of cool. Yeah.
See, I love that kind of thing though, because it's like if superheroes were real, like if you lived in the superhero universe, you're bound to have somebody with the same name as a famous superhero. So I love that I love that we get this character who's just carrying that burden where he has to like preface, like, no, not that one. Like no relation. He has like he says it all the time, like when he bursts into things or when he's just meeting people, he's like, no, not that one. I love that.
It kind of reminds me of like the Kurt Busiek, like the Creature of the Night stuff, like a character with the same name who's not a superhero, just a real dude. But I actually know someone, one of my stepdad's friends from high school. His name is, I think, Tim Bruce Wayne or something like that. Yeah, it's like he has the Bruce name in his name. And so, of course, he's got like a room painted like the skyline of Gotham and Batman shit everywhere. But
I almost picked Superman's Secret Identity as my book to read for this book club, which is about a kid in the real world named Clark Kent. And like everybody did Superman stuff on him for all his presents for his birthday and Christmas, and he hates it. And then,
we at the shop, we know a Barry Allen. So hi, Barry.
We also know a Jason Todd.
Oh my God. See, we know these people.
We have a Jason Todd on staff.
Did you guys know my real name is Steve Rogers?
Is it really?
No.
That's so weird because it says Scott Summers on my birth certificate. That's so weird.
My real name is Kevin Jean Gray McCormick. Cody, we were meant to be friends.
Apparently, but I've chosen Aton Emma Frost Manhoff.
God damn it.
Quiz question.
Yeah.
So we said that Jim Corrigan was the Spectre. We said Crispus Allen was the Spectre. There was another Spectre in the DC universe. Do you know who it was? Cody?
I do. Cody? It was Hal Jordan.
Yes. One of the quiz. Yes, you guys got one of them. Awesome.
Cody, I hand you the baton. You are now Aton's favorite.
I have a quiz question from the next issue that I know you'll get, Cody. We have to jump ahead. We have 2 minutes left, so I guess we're not going to the book. Well, okay. I'm going to jump all the way ahead to almost the end. So the book wraps up pretty tightly in issue 11 and 12. It kind of, you get one major event that happens is that Jix, Jimmy's wife, comes back from outer space to find him. And she's being followed by this alien who wants to marry her. She has no interest in marrying him. He had captured her and enslaved her people and was going to force her to marry him, right? So he comes and invades Earth and adds all kinds of complications, and Jimmy and his ragtag crew have to save the Earth from these evil aliens. Jimmy hops into, this is the thing, guys, I was telling you guys there was something that I was so excited about when I read the final of this book, so I wanted to make sure that we talked about this part. So Jimmy goes off into space. It seems completely random. He hops in a spaceship, he goes out into space, and he finds the Scrub, right? It's this race of aliens out in space. And the guy who he's talking to is clearly very concerned with rules and
and he's a bro dude.
The rules and how everything be fair. Do you guys know where the Scrub comes from?
No.
Can I tell you where the Scrub comes from?
Please.
And why I'm so excited by it?
Can I take a guess real quick?
Yes.
Oh wait, no. Sorry, Superman. I'm wrong.
Say the. What was your guess?
No, I was just gonna say I've read a book called Invasion. I forget what year it's from, by like Keith Giffen, and there's like a coalition of aliens against the Dominators. Were they one of the races involved?
I haven't read Invasion for a long time. It's possible. It's possible. But where they very first come, where we very first meet the Scrub, is in Superman versus Muhammad Ali.
Oh wow.
Superman versus Muhammad Ali. There's this alien race, the Scrub, who like, they have rules and everything needs to be fair, and they need to find the best to prove that they are the best fighters. They need the best fighters, so they get Muhammad Ali and they get Superman and they say, You guys have to fight, so we know exactly who the best fighter on earth is, so that our champion can fight that fighter, and we can confirm that our champion is better than this one. And they lay out all their very specific rules. I was blown away. I read the Scrub, and I was like, Scrub, and I'm reading it downstairs, and I'm looking at my bookcase. I'm like, where the fuck is the Scrub? And I reach and I grab my Superman versus Muhammad Ali, and I open it up. I'm like, it's the fucking Scrub from fucking Superman and Muhammad Ali. It blew my mind.
I had no idea, man. I had no idea. I was just fucking like super juiced and vibing on like the wrap up of the narrative. I had no idea that was a tie-in component.
Okay, so that's actually really cool, and I guess I was wrong on both counts because I actually had a second guess. My second guess was that a Scrub is a guy that can't get no love from me, hanging on the passenger side of his best friend's ride, trying to holler at me. So I was wrong.
I mean, ultimately, guys, I don't want no Scrub.
I don't want no Scrub either, but that was my other guess. So I guess it's wrong.
So before we like end all of this, should we give people like our best version of an A to B timeline for the story, or should we just let them read it and figure it out? Because we haven't really covered, I think, certain parts of the narrative that play into the overall plot, but I don't know if it really matters at this point. Read it. It's fucking fun. It's hilarious. It'll make you laugh.
I would say you've watched us giggling about this book for an hour. You can tell we clearly enjoyed it. You didn't get every bullet point of the plot. You didn't get every twist and turn, and maybe that's good. Now you can grab the series, and like we said, grab it and read it and take your time with it. Don't grab it and say, I'm going to read this on Saturday. Say, I'm going to grab this and I'm going to read it this month. Take a day off between issues. Come and like really treat yourself with the issues, and I think it'll make it a better reading experience. Just take your time, enjoy it, sprinkle it in with a bunch of other stuff you're reading and enjoying. And that's
optimal pacing would probably be like Cody and Eitan are saying, like maybe 2 issues to 3 issues a night. I think you could manage with 1, give yourself 2 weeks. But if you want to read a couple issues a night, it's not overwhelming at like 3 issues or so. It just gets to a point where you're like, what the fuck are they talking about? Don't get to that point.
Right. Well, wonderful. This was super fun, guys. I'm glad. Thank you for allowing me to explode with excitement over the Scrub.
Dude, thanks for saving that bombshell to the last couple minutes, because that would have been a completely anticlimactic ending to this hour of awesomeness if you had dropped that earlier. So thank you for fucking sticking to your guns through the whole thing.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. If anybody has any questions about this book, come talk to us. We have a copy or 2 available now. We have a copy or 2 coming next week from other distributors. So let us know if you don't see it on the site.
I feel like we should mention to people too, just in general, if you go to our normal website, capeandcowcomics.com, you click on shop and you search for something. If it says please inquire, click that button. It will let us know that you want to check that out, and then we can order one for you. So since we only have a copy or 2, go to our regular site, click the shop tab, search for this item, inquire about it, and we will get one for you delivered to you, or you can pick it up at the shop.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in closing, this is indeed one of the funniest books I read in a while, literally full of laugh out loud moments, and I'm not just exaggerating. I was actually witch cackling in the middle of the night, especially for superheroes. Superhero comedy is such a niche, and we don't see it enough. This is top tier superhero comedy. Not only does it mine actual continuity in fun and interesting ways that'll get you excited to go back and check out some other stuff for some context, but it's also just so original in its humor, and it really riffs on superhero concepts in general. Some big faves. No one is safe. Batman being probably the biggest household name out of like everyone. Not even he was safe from Matt Fraction and Steve Lieber's humor. So they take no prisoners. Absolutely hilarious. I had so much fun. This is something I like to have on my shelf because I'm definitely going to revisit it and probably read some old Superman and Jimmy Olsen just to lull at the context that these guys put it in, just for funsies.
Hey, super sidebar, but Fraction and DeConnick are still together, right?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, imagine him writing the story with another writer in the house, and like just how much they laughed at this shit. It had to have been a fucking laugh a minute. I can't even imagine it being anything else.
I mean,
hey babe,
I know, because we always like riff with our significant others, right? You run the jokes by them. I'm sure he did that, and she was probably like, "No, babe, that's bad," or like, "No, that's good."
I know that Bendis would hold. The Bendis family and the Fraction family are really tight. And Greg Rucka lives close by, and Steve Lieber, I believe, is in town in the same area.
Oh, wow.
But I know that Bendis and Rucka and Fraction would have these Superman like summits, maybe weekly, where they'd sit around a campfire in Bendis's backyard and just like, and Rucka must have been sitting there like, I'm gonna, Lois is being tracked down and she has to go to the Middle East and she has to go. And Superman's like, Rogozar is gonna like destroy any place of Krypton, and that Fraction's like, I'm gonna like steal the wheel from the Batmobile, like the song.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make the reporter say it.
Yeah, I'm gonna draw Jimmy's uncle getting smacked off a cliff by Lex's grandpa. Like,
he's like, I'm gonna have Superman eat so many hot dogs this month.
Oh,
great!
That's awesome. Thanks, guys. Thank everyone for joining us. We didn't highlight many comments in the chat, but I guess you guys were so sucked into what we were talking about that you didn't even want to comment. Thank you, Dave. You're right. Fraction is one of the best continuity miners in the biz. We love you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and thank you to everyone who checked this video out after it went live.
Yes.
Thanks. Bye, everybody. Until next time.
See ya.
See ya.